What got me to the point where I work with men and boys now is my own personal healing, both a survivor of childhood sexual assault and also being in recovery from alcoholism. Been sober as of this past December for 10 years, and just that whole time period dedicating my life to staying clean and sober brought me to a place where I've learned how to use my story, my healing experience to help others also to stay clean and sober, but also through that to understand and identify with the fact that alcohol and drugs is merely a coping mechanism. And so, what I found for myself was that those underlying issues were that I carried a lot of secrets, especially with men. It was interesting to see how a lot of them related to keeping the secret. The passion I have is first and foremost helping people to stay clean and sober, but it's also understanding that beyond that, it's coming to the place where you begin to do true healing work on yourself. That's what brought me to the place where I'm at today, is this my healing.
I got into this work with men and boys as a progression of doing violence against women work for 30 years. I got into that work because I grew up in a home witnessing domestic violence and had a lot of regular violence that I saw. And then I experienced sexual abuse as a child or more teenage years. And that stuff never really seemed like that big a priority because of all the domestic violence issues that were going on. So it wasn't that major of a thing. So it was always more concentrated on how do we have healthy families, raise healthy children, have opportunities for children to be who they are, develop in their natural way, without having all these different masks and facade and all these things I had to put up with in order to survive. Because on top of it, lived in an urban area with a lot of crime and violence as well. So not only was it the violence in the home, it's also violence in the community that I had to deal with. So I always felt like growing up, I could never really be who I truly was meant to be. And so getting into this work now, it's odd that it seemed like it took to become an adult before you start to realize your full personality and character of who you truly are.
I got into this work with Native men and boys, specifically also to address the needs of our Two Spirit and our males who identify as gay, bisexual, or Two Spirit, or are trans men. I also got into this work because I'm also a survivor of many forms of violence, growing up in a family where there was domestic violence, sexual assault, alcohol, and drug abuse. But also, I am a survivor of domestic violence myself.
So what got me into this work with men and boys was I would do a little survival camp for these boys, and a lot of times, like I noticed, there was no males in their lives. They were either single moms or grandmoms raising them. There was like absence of males in their life. I knew how fun it was to be outdoors, fishing, hunting, and all that stuff. So I'd want to share that with all these young boys. And I worked in with recovery too, but like I always wanted to do prevention. Like, how can I instill something into these young boys so like it's easier when they're young men? Like, how do I instill like being respectful, how to conduct yourself, carry yourself, how can you help, how can you be of service, that kind of stuff. So I would do these camps for these boys, and I would hear the conversations they would have. They'd open up, and I'd have to kind of take them to the side, or ask them if they're okay, or hearing the pressure that these moms have. And I get these boys only 2 full days, but it's a half a day, 1 full day, and another half a day. And then their moms and grandmas like, teach my son how to be a man, or teach my boy how to be a man. And I was like, I can't teach your boy how to be a man in 3 days. Hearing their desperation, like they're, please, like, I need help. And then going to school, coming back with my psychology degree, and like I'd do again work with recovery, and I'd hold men's talking circles for the community if they wanted to, and host a community sweat every week for the community, people in addictions, people who are recovering, just people who needed help. I don't know how it came to be. I was into this work, but to me, working with the children was like, I guess, a doorway, and that's like my thing. Like, I want to work with a lot with the youth.
I got into this work for men and boys because in our communities it's not talked about. I feel that if I had this type of support when I was growing up and going through the abuse that I was going through, I would have come forward and reported. And not having those safe spaces or those conversations in the community or within my family, even, having to hold those secrets for a long time until I got into my 30s, and being able to understand what that abuse was and what I actually went through, acceptance, and just my portion of living, and just being there for my people, because seeing how many men and boys especially, how much they have to hold on to that suffering for a long time. I know elders in their 80s that are still holding on to stuff that they went through as teenagers, especially two-spirit folks that are up there in age that, at that time weren't able to be who they were or who they are. Just getting into this work and, being around all of you and seeing what you guys have started, and that platform, raising that platform, gave me that opportunity to come out more and be, helpful in our communities. There's not a lot of voices out there that are helping Native men or boys with these issues, especially domestic violence. The underreporting that goes in with the DV situations, a lot of things that go into sexual assault are very underreported, or even talked about. Like I said before, things like this, they get swept under the rug, and those people have to deal with it on their own. Sometimes and sometimes it's a lifetime. By us being here and doing this work, we're breaking those cycles and starting to have that work visible to the communities, um, and raising that awareness for men and boys.